Just recently, I've published a documentary called Ireland and Jamaica, and it has become the most successful video on my channel to date. It gained 100,000 views in less than 2 days, and there are a lot of positive comments, almost all of them. And I just have to thank all my audience for all the support. But there were also some comments that inspired me to make this video, like the ones that said that this sign did exist, and I made a mistake saying that it might have been fake, or the ones that claimed that the original people of Ireland were black people in the 17th century. And it wasn't just one comment like that. There was no mention that the original people of Ireland were thought to be small black race and they were killed off. The record is clear that during unrest in Europe during 16 and 1700s, many black Europeans, yes, black Europeans, were expelled to the Americas. I also got emails from a person who gave details on the topic, saying that the Irish were swarthy black people and that they were Moors, the same people as the ones mentioned in my videos as the Maroons. So this person seriously believes that the Maroons in Jamaica were originally dark-skinned Irish people who spoke Gaelic. But before you dismiss this as complete and utter nonsense, the person provides explanation how that happened. Sir Johnston, in his article called Interracial Problems, says, the actual fact that thousands of years ago a Negroid race had penetrated Europe through Italy and France. See? This person also provides the sources. And it seems like it doesn't matter that the source is talking about the period 10,000 years ago or earlier. Somehow it applies to the 17th century as well. Now, sure, I can bring up other sources and debunk the claim that the original Irish people were black, to the point that we look into the origins of the so-called Black Irish myth and how and why it was developed in the United States in the 19th century. But this is not going to solve the main issue. Why would you trust me and my sources, and not the people who are claiming that the original Irish people in the 17th century had dark skin? What if they are right? How can we know the truth? So with this video, I'd like to do something more useful than just debunking claims. Instead, I'd like to share the tools that I use when I'm doing the research for my videos. I find these tools to be an essential element that allows anyone to do one most important thing, which is the ability to distinguish information that is most likely true, not true, but most likely true, from the information that is most likely false. There are 3 parts to this vlog. One is talking about the actual problems, the second part is about the essential tools, and then step-by-step instruction how to apply these tools. So the problems. First of all, often people don't even realize that the opposite of truth is not lies, it's falsehood, which can include lies, but not necessarily. Some people really believe what they're saying. They're not lying, but it doesn't mean they're telling the truth either. They might not know the truth, and they might not know that they don't know. Sometimes we misunderstand the truth, even when we know it, because we don't have an access to the full context, or we lack education in that particular subject. The next thing that people often forget is that there is a third option possible. Apart from true and false, there is also not given, when there is simply no sufficient evidence to prove either true or false. Yet people want to know the truth, and note, usually the truth that supports their worldview and their opinion, so they refuse to accept the position, we don't know. In fact, the not given situation is the one that opens up an opportunity to make the most ridiculous claims. And we cannot disprove these claims because we cannot disprove something that doesn't exist. You know what? There is a giraffe standing right next to me. You can't see it, but it's there. You don't trust me? Then prove me wrong. Where is your evidence that there is no giraffe next to me? You cannot prove that giraffe next to me doesn't exist in the same way as I cannot prove that Black Irish never existed in the 17th century, or that the sign in the UK never existed before 1980s. It's not possible to prove non-existence, and that's why the burden of proof is always on someone making the claim. If my claim is there is a giraffe, I should be the one proving it, and I can. Oh, not by showing the giraffe to you, but I have a book that says there is a giraffe standing next to Irina when she's recording a video. See? The book says so. Do you believe me now? Well, you shouldn't, because that's not good evidence. Sometimes people are faced with the kind of truth they don't want to know. So when a lot of evidence presented that contradict position they hold, they will ignore them and defend their false position even harder because they don't realize it's false. The good example are the comments from the Ireland and Jamaica video that support a false position without realizing that their position is false, are related to Jonkanu, which is a Jamaican tradition developed around the beginning of 18th century under the influence of West African and Irish cultures, so both. And I actually said that in the video, that it's both. But here are the comments. Jonkanu is not a Jamaican tradition influenced by Irish tradition. This tradition is purely African. People are making these statements without trying to check anything prior to leaving a comment because they're sure they know this already, so why bother checking? This happens to us all the time in different areas of life. We don't question ourselves about things that our parents told us, though some of them might be false. It just doesn't occur to us to challenge these beliefs. A good example, people go to church every Sunday. Why Sunday? Why not Saturday? Why not Friday? Why not twice a week? Why go to church at all? Most people learn this from their parents and then pass it on to their children without questioning. What's most interesting is that none of this has anything to do with intelligence or our level of education in general. And prime example is believe in God. There are very intelligent and educated people who believe in God, and there are also very intelligent and educated people who don't believe in God. Both base their positions on facts, evidence, and sources, yet they come to completely opposite conclusions. How's that possible? Well, because they use different facts, evidence, and sources, or they see the same facts but interpret them in different ways, depending on a whole range of their biases and background and things like that. As a result, we have two people holding two opposite positions. One is saying, these are the facts supported with evidence and here are the sources. And the other one is saying, no, these are the facts, evidence, and sources. The question is, who's right? How can you know that these sources are reliable and the other ones are not? And how can you know that you're not making the mistake and it's that other person is making it? The reality is, today we live in a digital age. Before, it was very easy for powerful institutions to hide information from us. There was only mainstream media that could be controlled and printed books, the access to which could be controlled. Today, social media, including YouTube, allows any one of us to become the source of information that would reach thousands or even millions of people. That's why we have a very different problem today, which is all information is available at one click, but also all misinformation is available at one click as well. Distinguishing one from the other is this super skill that every single one of us has to develop. This is where the main tools come into play. And these tools are different branches of philosophy. Unfortunately, many people have very vague understanding of what philosophy is or how to apply it in real-life situations, which I'm going to share in this step-by-step section. But first, the tools. Number one is the theory of knowledge. This is to have a clear understanding what it means to know and how we know that we know. Most useful is probably doing a course on epistemology, which is a part of the theory of knowledge, that focuses on methods, validity, and scope, and the distinction between a justified belief and opinion. Basically, it focuses on understanding the concept of truth, what it is and what it's not. Number two is the course in metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principle of things, including abstract concepts such as time, space, being, reality, everything to do with identity, like race, gender, nationality, ethnicity. These are various human-made concepts that do have very much real effect in our lives. This helps to view the world in a different way and understand who we really are and why people do things the way they do them, which in turn teaches us empathy. Some people mentioned to me in the comments earlier that I have this thick skin or tough skin because I don't get angry, when people are leaving some insulting comments, and don't block these so-called haters. But it's not because I have some tough skin or something. I don't think I do. I just sincerely want to understand their position. I don't agree with it, but I want to understand where they're coming from and why they're wrong, or maybe where I am wrong, so I can learn from this. Number 3 is, of course, logic, argumentation and reasoning as a branch of philosophy. Learning how to structure proper arguments and come to logical conclusions. These will help to minimize false reasoning. We cannot get rid of it completely, and that's why at start I said not just true and false information, but information that is most likely true or most likely false. Logic, argumentation, and reasoning is not just something we learn, it's something that requires practice, which can be achieved through something simple, like arguing your point of view in social media, or challenging your own views, like in discussions, or watching debates, or participating in debates. So learning the basics from these 3 branches of philosophy helped me personally in doing quality research on any topic, and that's why I call them tools. Now there's step-by-step instruction, at least what I did, and hopefully some of it might be useful to someone else. Step number 1, recognizing my own biases. There is like a whole list, like I love Ukraine and I love Jamaica. These 2 countries are special for me, so by default I will defend them no matter what, and this prevents my objectivity. We cannot get rid of our biases, but we can recognize them and take them into account when doing the research and ask for third-party opinion to minimize mistakes. Step number 2, learning about all the logical fallacies with examples, why and how people fall for them in real life. And I would like to share one of such examples with you from, the whole range of comments under the Ireland and Jamaica video talking about this sign. I mentioned that this sign is most likely fake, created in 1980s, and there is no evidence such signs ever existed in the UK before. However, this doesn't mean discrimination never existed. It did, very much so, and I said so. My point was, this sign was fake, but instead there were other signs that really existed, and I showed them, these ones. The discrimination was very real, and guess what? We don't need fake signs to prove that. We have the real ones. And now see how people misinterpreted what I was saying and began arguing something completely different. My grandfather was a part of the Windrush generation, and if he were alive, he would tell you back in those days they didn't want to rent to Black West Indians and the Irish. So those signs that said no blacks, no Irish, no dogs are real and not fake. 2 problems with this comment. This is an example of a very common logical fallacy called a strawman fallacy, which is refuting an argument different from originally presented. So my argument, there was no such sign. They bring up a completely different argument, which is there was no discrimination. Then they refute this argument by explaining why there was discrimination. I know there was. This wasn't my argument. And the second problem is that they draw a conclusion that because there was discrimination, therefore this sign was real, which doesn't follow. There could have been discrimination, but the sign was fake, or there were no signs at all, or there were different signs. And the last one is the correct answer. There were different signs. Another example related to this sign argument. Speak to the people who lived through this time, and they will tell you. This is called a personal testimony, which takes me to step number 3, working with personal testimonies and oral traditions. When information gets passed on orally. You might have heard that this is the most unreliable source of information possible. That is, my mother said so, is not evidence and cannot be used as proof. But I don't think enough people understand why this is the case. They might think it's obvious because people can lie, but no, the main reason is this one. Let's say we have 10 people witnessing exactly the same thing. Ask them to describe it the next day. You will have 10 different stories often featuring different details. Then add a few years and ask them to describe it again. What do you think is going to happen? Do it with yourself. Read a letter that you wrote 10 years ago about your life, or read your diary from 10 years ago. You'd be shocked by how much stuff you forgot, and even more shocked by how much stuff you remembered the wrong way. I wish more people knew just how terrible our memory is. It's inaccurate, it's selective, it's influenced by our biases, by our mood, emotions we experience at the time of receiving information. We regularly form false memories about things that never happened, or they did happen, but we remembered them in the wrong way. So it's a false memory. This sign is an excellent example of a phenomenon that is known as the Mandela Effect. It's a type of false memory that occurs when many different people incorrectly remember the same thing. It actually happens more often than you might think. I will leave the links to some examples in the description, so please have a look at them to get mind blown. The reason why so many people in Britain think this sign existed is because the media in the 1980s and 90s kept repeating this again and again. The discrimination was real, plus other signs were real, so the false memory was formed by replacing those other signs with this one. So does this all mean that we should ignore personal testimonies and information passed orally? No, they can indeed be important, especially as a source of opinion, and they can also lead us to some good, credible written sources. But personal testimonies by themselves are not proof, not evidence, and cannot be used as such for events or things happening. If you rely on them, it's a guarantee you will be misled into believing all sorts of nonsense. And this takes me to step number 4. Cross-referencing. This is not just providing several references. It is finding evidence from multiple sources that are neutral to the subject or represent different points of view. The simplest way to demonstrate this, if you want to prove any events described in the Bible, you cannot just use the Bible for this or any Christian sources. Instead, you need to search for sources that are neutral or non-Christian, like archaeological evidence or writings by non-Christian authors. So you would have Christian writings, non-Christian writings, and archaeological sources, all three pointing at the same thing. This can be used as an example of cross-referencing. If, however, you have 3 verses of the Bible pointing at the same thing, that's not cross-referencing, even if they come from different authors, because all of them are Christians. So it's the same, it's a source with the same point of view. What happens if you find different sources and they don't point at the same thing, in fact, contradict each other? This means there is an issue with the information you're trying to check. Either it's false or there is something wrong with the sources. So the last step, step number 5, is working with the sources, distinguishing a credible source with a non-credible one. The so-called credible sources, the websites of educational institutions, government websites, academic database, official encyclopedias, and so on. Non-credible ones would be Wikipedia, because it can be edited by anyone, posts in social media, our friends and family, just to name a few. It doesn't mean that non-credible sources should be ignored. No, they can be used to trace false information, where it comes from, or worse, how it became common knowledge. But non-credible sources cannot be used as evidence, for anything. In fact, if you are an academic researcher and you provide a non-credible source, you might even lose your status and your job and everything, basically. Can credible sources be wrong? Of course they can. Most common reason, they go out of date. New discoveries are made all the time. So whatever was true 100 years ago might no longer be applicable. This becomes even more complicated if we're trying to do historical research or verify historical events. The mistake people often make when working with the sources is that they're trying to prove the position they already have and look for sources that prove the things they already believe in. For instance, back to the initial claim made at the start of the video that the Irish people originally had dark skin. No matter what we think of this, we should check all sources, including the ones that contradict whichever position we have, and see what they're based on. How credible are these sources? And let the evidence take us to what actually happened. So, did original Irish people have dark skin? The short answer is no. And it's actually quite easy to prove, because if they did, they would have died out of vitamin D deficiency. The long answer is slightly more complicated. There is an out of Africa model that focuses on the theory that all Homo sapiens come from Africa and began moving towards Europe around 60,000 years ago, and it is assumed that they had dark skin. There is also a theory that the complexion that we perceive today as European developed around 10,000 years ago. This includes lighter skin, which is an adaptation to get vitamin D when there is hardly any sunshine hours. So, yes, according to this theory, there were dark-skinned people in Europe, but that was 10,000 years ago, and those humans were not Irish. So even if there were Homo sapiens, who we can call Black Europeans, 10,000 years ago, but by the times of ancient Greece, times really well documented, by the way, there were none left. So if somebody wants to jump from, the 17th century to ancient Greece, they're about 2,000 years late. Could there be people called Moors who lived in Ireland? Sure. Were they Irish? No. Just like I live in Jamaica, but I'm not a Jamaican. Let's assume Ireland was isolated and people with dark skin somehow continued living there. Why didn't they develop their adaptation to the lack of sunshine, while the humans who lived south of them did? How does that make any sense? And where do the European-looking people come from then, if the northern ones were dark-skinned? You see, people don't usually debunk these claims because the answer is just so obvious and they just don't want to spend their time doing it. But I thought, it would be fair to mention these things because they are quite popular. You'd be surprised how many people are watching videos produced by YouTubers who don't know how to check information properly. I don't want to go into details and literally disprove every single point that people are saying who believe in this theory, but you can do it yourself by using the steps that I have provided. The comments that have been mentioned today, on very different topics, they have one thing in common. All of them are claiming something that never existed. Dark-skinned Irish people, John Canoe in Africa, this sign in the UK, no. And all of these people writing comments tell me to do better research, even though there is no proof to be found. So let me finish this video with this fantastic comment. Just because there is no direct proof of something doesn't mean it didn't exist. True, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. Maybe the evidence, haven't been found yet. Or maybe the indirect evidence we have is not sufficient. But what is the conclusion that you're going to make from this? The most sensible position is it didn't exist until proven otherwise. If in doubt or inclined to believe that, maybe it existed, my gut feeling is telling me, this is actually the least sensible position to ever hold in life, because it guarantees you would be the victim of misinformation all the time, and it would be very easy for others to fool you. Let's say there is an X, and we don't have evidence for its existence. The problem is when people are making an assumption that there is a balance between X exists and the X doesn't exist positions. The reality is there is a huge disbalance in favor of the X doesn't exist. To explain how this works, I usually use unicorns. Or the giraffe, remember, it's still there, standing right next to me. But for the purpose of this video, I have found an even better example, which includes green swans. So far, we're aware that swans come in two colors, white and black. No green swan has ever been found. So between the two positions, green swans don't exist, or the green swans exist, the position green swans don't exist is the right position. Even if we cannot prove that maybe there is somewhere unknown little swan, green swan population, on the planet, somewhere in the hiding. Still, in this case, the assumption green swans don't exist is the sensible one. This is because if we decide to hold the position, green swans do exist, it would open up a whole new level of issues. Not only we will not be able to say anything conclusive about green swans, we will no longer be able to say anything conclusive about the real and existing black and white swans either. Why? Well, because how can we be sure then that swans don't play the piano? Ridiculous? But wait, we don't have direct evidence for swans playing the piano, but hey, not having direct evidence doesn't mean this doesn't exist. Or maybe it's only black and white swans who don't play the piano, but the green swans do. You haven't seen them, how do you know? See the problem with this? If you stick to the position, anything is possible without proper evidence, you open up the door for various people to fool you into believing all sorts of nonsense by exploiting your emotions and your biases. This position will also paralyze your intellectual ability because you would never be able to rely on your knowledge and apply it in real life, to make decisions. So sure, if there is no direct proof of something, it doesn't mean it didn't exist. But it does mean that holding the position it didn't exist is the most sensible one. The conclusion, I must admit that the inspiration for this video came not only from the comments, but also from the fact that I had an opportunity to participate in the event held at the University of West Indies on the 16th of November, which was to celebrate the World Philosophy Day. I always think it's such a shame that philosophy is not being promoted as something really important, especially to the younger generation, to the point that people often don't realize what studying philosophy is or how to apply it in everyday life. So I'm using this opportunity to share a little bit of my passion and a little insight on my research and how I do it. I still don't know what's going to be the title of this video because I don't want to put the philosophy in the title because it's going to scare people away, as my channel is not about philosophy. But just to be clear, this video is about some basics of practical philosophy and how I personally use it in my research when doing the journalistic work. Hopefully you have found some of this information useful. If so, please give the video a like, and thank you so much for watching, or rather listening. As always, huge thanks to our patrons. They're the people who make my work possible. If you wish to join and support our channel and the research we do, you can do so on Patreon from only $5 per month. Oh, another example of Mandela Effect. Do you know what my name is? I introduce myself in every single video. I literally say, my name is Irina, and I write my name on the screen every single start of the video. However, most people think that my name is this. It's not. My name is Irina with an I. But people watch my videos and they still don't see it. They just think they know what it's spelled because they spell it the way they hear it. They don't look at the screen. So maybe you've seen 100 videos of mine with this name spelled like this and you still didn't know it. I just find it quite entertaining. One of my close friends here in Jamaica, he keeps calling me Irene. I never correct him because I know, even if I did, I think maybe once at the very start, and he kept calling me Irene anyway. It's Irina, or if you want to use the Ukrainian, then it's Irina. Irina. Yeah, that's my real name, Irina. All right, bye guys.